Hey, hello and welcome everybody. My name is Colin Campbell and I'm the editor of the Journal of Advertising Research. And today it's a really great pleasure to be here and to basically promote and give a preview with Ben and Eddie of the upcoming special issue on Gen AI that they've done. So I'm super excited to introduce both Ben and Eddie. Des unfortunately can't be here today, but here we've got Ben. Ben Lowe is a professor of marketing at Kent Business School at the University of Kent in the UK, and he's a leading voice in research on consumer behavior and innovation adoption. He currently serves as an associate editor at the Journal of Advertising Research. Thank you so much, Ben. Regional editor for Europe at the European Journal of Marketing, and he's vice president of global membership for the Academy of Marketing Science. Ben's research explores how consumers adopt and interact with new technologies. So thank you so much, Ben, for being here and for also working on the special issue.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
then
Colin.
we've also got Eddie as well too. So Eddie Luo is a colleague of his as well, and he's a lecturer in marketing at Kent Business School, also in the UK, same school, and he's an associate editor of JAR as well. So thank you, Eddie, for your service for that too. He previously served as head of marketing and director of global engagement at Southwest University of Political Science and Law. Eddie's research explores consumer psychology and behavior across marketing communications, innovation, adoption, tourism, and entrepreneurship. He's an active reviewer and was recognized with the 2024 Emerald Literati Outstanding Reviewer Award. So thank you so much, Eddie, for your work on the special issue, and of course, also all the great things you do as an AE for us.
Thanks, Colin.
Awesome. So I want to turn it over to Ben and Eddie to go through and give an overview of some of the amazing articles that are in this special issue that they curated, and also discuss sort of what's next and sort of pulling some different threads together on that. So before I do that, I want to really thank them for all the work that they put into doing the special issue. This can take a lot of time to go through and manage all the submissions that they received and the reviews, and then also curating the different papers and helping to improve them. I also want to have a special thank you to all the reviewers that helped in that process, and of course, all of the authors that submitted to this special issue. So thank you so much, Ben and Eddie, for the great work that you did on this special issue, and I'll turn it over to you folks now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Colin. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for coming along. Colin's done the introduction, so I won't go over those again. But just thanks to Colin for initiating the special issue. Obviously, really hot topic at the moment. And we were just discussing this before the call started that, in terms of how special issues work, the conception of the special issue. It's probably been a couple of years until we've reached this point nearly. So yeah, glad that we've managed to wrap it up. What we'll be doing today is, yeah, and I hope you find the articles interesting. But what we'll be doing today is just giving a bit of an overview of the special issue, the articles which are inside it, and then kind of wrapping up towards the end, looking at some of the key takeaways and some of the key useful areas for future research. If it's okay with yourselves, we'll take questions at the end, but please feel free to post them into the chat, and then we'll once we've wrapped up at the end, we'll have a look at those and try and answer any questions that you guys have. Thanks again for coming along. Okay, so that was working a minute ago. Just trying to advance the slides. Bear with me. So just as a bit of an introduction, and obviously people probably come from different backgrounds and have varying amounts of experience with AI and advertising. But just to provide a little bit of background before we get into the detail of the special issue. As you know, AI is a hugely hot topic at the moment. It's affecting all of us, and one of those industries which is affecting greatly is, of course, the advertising industry. As you'll perhaps know, AI is not new to the advertising industry. There are lots of different examples of how AI has been used in the past and transformed different kinds of advertising roles, for example, through programmatic advertising, search engine optimization, analysis of data through sentiment analysis, and so on. A whole host of different areas in which it's already impacted the advertising industry. But I think what's perhaps important to note is that we've seen recently a significant increase in the use of AI more generally, and generative AI in particular. We've seen more of an increase in use of this recently due to more powerful capabilities that it has, and simpler user interfaces. This is no surprise in a sense because in some ways it offers marketers a great deal of promise. It offers us more ability to personalize. It offers more automation, and better data analysis capabilities, all the things which we as marketers want to be able to do better and at lower cost and more efficiently. So it's no surprise in a sense that over recent years, with technological developments, that we're seeing an increase in its use and therefore an increase in interest in it. There's lots of evidence of advertisers investing heavily in its use, lots of anecdotal evidence in the press about the amounts that some companies are investing in the use of AI, and some projections are that around about up to 10% of tasks might become might be AI related by 2030. So obviously a significant area of development, and that's what makes it so interesting. I think just to mention here, I've obviously got the G in brackets there for generative. This special issue was primarily about generative AI, and the majority of the articles focused upon the generative aspect. Sometimes it's not so easy to split up, so sometimes we'll use GAI or AI depending on the article that we're talking about. So because of these recent developments, because of increasing use of AI and it becoming much more mainstream, the questions, of course, have moved on from should we use it to how do we make the best use of it. And I think when you'll see an overview of the articles in the special issue, that those are the kinds of questions that you're going to see that those articles try to speak to, and the kinds of questions that they try to answer. Again, some of this on the next slide may not be new to you if you've been a researcher in the AI area for some time, but for those who are newer to it as a research area, then as with many new technologies, it offers a lot of promise in terms of its benefits. And you can pretty much group these benefits in terms of two key things. One, its effectiveness, so better personalization, for example, increased creativity, better insights through data analysis capabilities. So that's effectiveness, or you can think about these benefits in terms of efficiency, so the speed at which it enables us to carry out tasks, and the cost, obviously less costly processes potentially. So those are the typical benefits that are being touted around the use of AI in advertising, but it's not without its risks. And there are a number of different risks which we as researchers need to think about. So these risks I've kind of categorized into three main areas. One, based around the data that's used. Two, based around the content that's produced, and these things overlap a little bit. And three, in terms of how it's integrated into existing processes and work practices. So thinking about the data that's used, it's come up in the press a lot around algorithm bias, where that data comes from, and fairness related to AI usage. And because of that, there's a huge priority for organizations to be transparent about their use of AI and to be able to explain the results they get from their use of it. And that all overlaps with issues around data privacy and ethics. So not without its risks in terms of the data that is used, where it comes from, and what that creates, what it leads to. Second key area, as I mentioned, is around the content that's produced in connection with customers. Whilst there are lots of great examples of advertising, for example, which have been shown to provide some really creative, award-winning advertising using AI, it's not without its risks. Sometimes it comes across as a little bit eerie, for example, or creates content that may offend, perhaps through some of the algorithm bias that I talked about a minute ago. So when thinking about the risks of AI, we've got to think about them in terms of the data that's used and the content that's produced and how it connects with customers. So try and understand more about AI salience and what people know about AI and different consumer groups that may know more or less about it. And one of the key benefits around use of AI is it promises greater personalization. So in that sense, that can be good, but it can also become very intrusive. And that speaks to one of the articles in the special issue that we'll talk about later. So it can be a benefit, can be a risk, hence a double-edged sword. And then finally, this third key area around the risks might be classified as the degree to which it can be integrated into existing processes and whether or not organizations have the right governance structures to cope with the use of AI in a productive way. And again, certainly the first two articles speak to very much to that issue. So now what I'm going to do is just think about the special issue in more detail and the articles that are in it. And in a sense, when you do a special issue, you never know what articles are going to get sent in. We were very lucky in this special issue. They managed to group themselves nice and neatly. So the way in which I'm going to talk about these articles, and Eddie later, is that we're going to group it into three key themes. So the first group of articles looks at use of AI from the industry's perspective. Okay, and so there are two articles there which look at how AI gets incorporated into organizations and which are really interesting from that perspective. We'll then move on to the consumer perspective and see how consumers interpret AI advertising that they know is AI generated. And so there are four articles in the special issue which look at the consumer behavior issues around AI, and Eddie's going to talk about those. Thanks, Eddie. And then the final, so it's a group of articles, one article rather than a group of articles, but makes an interesting segue for us as researchers because it gets us to think about how we as researchers can utilize the kind of data that AI produces for us. So a useful sort of research methods article towards the end there. Okay, so starting then with the industry perspective, a number of questions arise. We might wonder to ourselves, how is AI transforming roles within the advertising industry? And then we might think about how leadership within these organizations needs to react to these changes. And we might think about how advertisers are adapting to the integration of AI through requiring new sort of skill sets, new competencies, and how roles are changing. So in a sense, those are the key sorts of questions that these next two articles speak to. So I'll just overview the articles briefly. And of course, as I mentioned at the start, more detail on the special issue gets released in June, although most of the articles are available now pre-published online on JAR's website. So do take a look at those for the detail. So the first article is a paper by Vlad Demsar, Carla Ferraro, Sean Sands, and Andrew Cohn. And it's called Harmony or Discord: The Intersection of Generative AI and Human Creativity in Advertising. In this article, the authors try to explore how generative AI in particular is impacting human creativity within advertising organizations and the implications this has for work and organizations. They do this through a number of in-depth interviews with senior executives in advertising organizations. Obviously, senior executives can be harder to reach, and these kinds of processes which they were delving into are complex, less well understood, and so these kinds of research methods can be useful in this situation. But essentially what they find through these interviews is that GAI, generative AI, enables advertisers in a number of ways through its ability to outsource routine tasks. So essentially speaking to some of those benefits I mentioned earlier, freeing up time and enabling more of a focus on the creative elements of brand strategy rather than the routine tasks. Consequently, they also find, as you might expect as well, that it can't compete with human creativity, and GAI can't replace humans. but it is there as a useful way to augment what humans do and free up time to enable them to do it better. But again, going back to this issue of AI being a double-edged sword, it also exhibits a number of challenges. The first challenge that they identify is what they call creative homogenization. So in other words, reliance on AI sometimes providing some kind of convergence in the types of outputs that might get created, and therefore sometimes a loss of uniqueness and a loss of brand voice. This links very much to the next article, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, and I liked what they said in that article, because they said it may limit our imagination through trapping us in a filter bubble. And that's really what is meant here by this process of creative homogenization, and one of the risks that we can attach to the use of GAI. And the other main risk that they identified was around the ethical dilemmas and around transparency, so around issues of copywriting, around issues of intellectual property protection, and around issues of disclosure around how content gets created. I think perhaps one of the key things that they conclude in the article is a need for reconsidering new guidelines around regulation about the use of AI. So if you want to find out more about that article, the full site's down there at the bottom of the slide, and forms a nice segue to the next article, which is by Weila, Martin Liu, and Ruizhi Yuan. This paper's title is Exploring the Integration of Generative AI in Advertising Agencies, a co-creative process model for human AI collaboration. So in a similar vein, they look at the similar sorts of issues to what Demsar and colleagues look at in the article I just went over. But the way that their article nicely differentiates from what Demsar and colleagues do is that it looks at developing a co-creative process for the use of GAI in advertising organizations. And in particular, they look at text to photo generation for use in content. So the article explores how creative processes change within advertising organizations when text-to-image GAI tools are adopted. Again, they use interviews with executives, but also use archival data as well to triangulate some of their observations from the interviews. The process that they've generated is down below there at the bottom of the slide, and it starts with, again, as you might expect with a new technology, it starts with this idea of readiness for adopting generative AI. And it concludes that there are probably three main influences around which determine people's readiness to adopt generative AI within advertising contexts. And these are in a particular order because, in a sense, that's where it starts. It starts first with the adaptive mindset, and then moves through to once somebody is ready to start thinking about adopting AI. That then relates to things like technological competence and their skills that they have, and that then leads to better contextual awareness about the uses of AI and how it can be implemented, and in a sense forms a self-reinforcing circle by positively influencing that adaptive mindset. It then looks at how this process manifests itself, using examples of how AI has been used in practice, and very much views it as a process of co-creation, as you can see down in the diagram there. So key implications, again, in alignment with the last article, that GAI tools are a collaborative partner, not a threat to be resisted. But one of the key things that comes from this article is that they identify a whole bunch of new skill sets and training needs for people working in the AI and advertising field. So some really useful, interesting insights there from these two articles around the use of GAI in advertising organizations. So that then makes a nice segue to get us to start thinking about how consumers perceive GAI generated content. And I'll pass you over to Eddie in a sec, who can overview the papers in the special issue around consumer behavior and AI. But a couple of key questions emerge. Do consumers necessarily react always positively to GAI? And when, in particular, do they start to react negatively to GAI content? So some of the papers speak to those issues. Sometimes it's about the degree to which consumers know that that particular content is generated by AI. So some of these papers speak to this issue of salience and people's knowledge about AI. So related questions are around how does AI salience affect trust and persuasion, attitudes, and purchase? And finally, how does GAI advertising impact advertising effectiveness across different kinds of media channels, cultures, and other segments? So now I'm going to pass you on to Eddie, who's going to overview those next four papers. Thanks, Eddie. Over to you.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Thanks, Ben. And my pleasure to share the latest article in the special issue from the consumer behavior perspective. So like Ben introduced, we have two papers from the industry perspective, and we can find that methods used in this consumer perspective are quite different. All of the papers actually they are using empirical quantitative research methods and all use experiments and all use multiple studies. And the first two papers, they use multi-methods. So besides experiments, they also incorporate like field study or observation. These are the overview of the method of the four papers. And given the topic, they investigate different aspects or different nature related to AI, including, say, AI salience, AI disclosure, and personalization. And finally, the last paper reviews different types of AI, different types of endorser, including AI versus human endorser. So these are the topic of the four papers from the consumer perspective. Okay, now I'm gonna briefly introduce the first paper in the second group from the consumer perspective. So this paper is by Hansen, Sorrow, Clausen, and Prethler. And the topic is the differential impact of AI salience on advertising engagement and attitude, scary, good AI advertising. So this study is quite interesting because they find like Ben said, they find the double sword effect from AI. On one hand, AI enhances ad engagement. So people may have more click with the ad if they find it's made from AI. But on the other hand, it also decreases attitude. And the decreased attitude, okay, so the negative relationship between AI salience and AI attitude is seriously mediated by negative emotions and reactance. So this is the primary finding from this research. They find that AI salience leads to negative emotions. In turn, it leads to consumer reactance, and finally, decreased attitude towards the ad. So they have four studies, and they incorporate observations from comments, from online comments, and they also conduct experiments. And so the main findings are from two sides. On one hand, AI salience leads to positive engagement on social media, but it also diminishes or mitigate consumer attitude towards this advertisement. And so a quick takeaway is that we should, as advertisers, we should highlight the need for multiple dependent variable. We should take a more comprehensive perspective when we evaluate, when we're assessing the effectiveness of advertisement. Otherwise, we might be biased toward some of the measurement, some of the metrics, as they may present different findings. For example, this study, they show that while AI salience increases engagement, but it actually decreases attitudes. Okay, so Ben, can you please move on? Okay, thanks. The next topic, the next paper discusses about AI disclosure, and it's by Toll, Nog, Wu, Kianian, and Zhang. And the topic is when AI doesn't sell product, why using AI generated advertisement backfires for luxury brands. So they set the research contest into the luxury brand contest. And because they have the assumption that luxury brands are associated with authenticity and increased effort, they have this assumption. But on the other hand, the use of AI often makes people think they have less effort involved because they reduce human involvement in the creation of the ads. So through this mechanism, they find that consumers evaluate AI-generated content as lower effort, which contradicts with the assumption that luxury brands should be associated with more effort, which indicates authenticity. And therefore, generative AI-generated content for luxury brands is perceived as inauthentic by consumers because they contradict with the assumption that luxury brand is associated with authenticity. So from the research framework, we can find this underlying process. So AI disclosure, they lead to perceived effort, which in turn influences ad authenticity and finally ad evaluation. While the use of AI may make people think there's less effort involved in creating this ad, therefore, it's not a very suitable strategy for luxury brand for this high-end brands, but they also suggest a possibility to mitigate this effect. Thus, they suggest that these luxury brands, they can employ highly creative generative AI advertising content. In this way, this highly creative content may, again, increase consumers' awareness or perception that, well, these brands, they do involve high effort in creating these ads or in more aligned with the assumption that luxury brands should be associated with authenticity and effort. So by using more creative AI-generated content, this effect can be mitigated. So in other words, they find a boundary condition for this effect. And the method involves both field study and experiment. That's fine. That's fine. Thanks, Ben. Okay, thanks. And the next paper is by Sun Xue and Sun. And the topic is inverted U-shape effect of personalization on consumer attitudes in AI-generated ads, striking the right balance between utility and threats. So in this paper, they argue this very important concept, perceived utility threat difference. To illustrate, they define the influence of AI on consumers by a difference. So the difference is between the utility provided by AI minus the perceived threat by consumers. So this difference mediates the relationship between personalization and consumer attitudes. Specifically, through 3 online experiments, they find that a moderate degree of personalization leads to enhanced attitudes compared with low or high degree of personalization. So it's not too high, not too low, but moderate degree of personalization, to do the trick. And they find the inverted U-shaped relationship, or the relationship between personalization and consumer attitudes, is mediated by the perceived utility threat difference. So this is the underlying process. And likewise, the previous study, they also identify a boundary condition or moderators, which is privacy concern. And specifically, if consumers, they are more concerned with privacy, if they are highly privacy concerned, then this effect will be amplified. By contrast, low privacy concerns will attenuate this relationship. So very interesting. They find the inverted U shape. It's not like a linear. It's not like positive or negative, but they find this inverted U shape effect. And all of the methods involved are experiments, but they conducted 3 online experiments. So this is the third paper, and then next, please. Okay, thank you. The last paper from the consumer perspective group talks about the different types of endorser, human versus AI generated endorser. It's by Park, Chu, and Chang. The topic is choosing the right AI generated endorser, human-like versus cartoon-like avatars for new product endorsement. This paper, they actually examine a research model which start from the independent variable, which is human-like versus cartoon-like endorser. And then this independent variable, they will influence consumers' preference. And the preference in turn will influence consumers' visual thinking, which in turn influences consumers' emotion, and finally influences pricing option. So they have 6 hypotheses altogether, and some of the hypotheses, they have 2 sub-hypotheses, etc. But they use 3 online experiments. They use 3 online experiments to test the model. So they test different relationship in different studies, but general conclusion is that consumers, they have a preference for human-like rather than cartoon-like endorsers. This is based on their research finding, and the visual thinking shapes consumer preference and which highlights the need for visually engaging AI avatar endorsers. So these are from the 4th paper, which discuss about different types of endorsers. That's the 4 paper from the consumer perspective, and Ben, hand over to you.
Great, thanks, Eddie. So, in terms of special issues so far, we looked at the papers which look at how AI is getting integrated within organizations, and then Eddie overviewed how consumers respond to AI-generated content and highlighted a number of important sort of aspects around that. What we're going to look at now is the final paper of the special issue, paper 7, which was really about how we can utilize AI-generated data, given it offers us a number of advantages. So this paper was written by Scott Wright and Ainsley Schultz, and it was called Unleashing the Power of AI and Big Data for Advertising, a framework for intensive longitudinal mediation when using AI to study advertising effectiveness. And essentially in this paper, they illustrate, as we probably already know, that much existing marketing or advertising data is primarily cross-sectional. And if we're lucky, we might get a little bit of longitudinal data there, but usually it's at 2 or 3 points in time. And they make the point that in the context of AI-generated data, that we can sometimes end up with access to data that provides data points over multiple, sometimes continuous points of time. And they say that, there aren't any existing methods which can be utilized to analyze this kind of data using traditional mediation techniques. So increasingly, when we end up having the ability to access some really rich and useful data, which can be harnessed at multiple points in time, multiple in their definition being above generally 5, but sometimes continuously, then this provides us with all sorts of opportunities for how we analyze causal effects and make sense of that data and the dynamics of the mediation and how it takes place over a period of time. So the points that they make in the article are that such data can provide a really powerful way for us to study causality and mediation effects over time, but with field data. And interestingly, they did a little bit of a content analysis of the 3 key advertising journals, that's JAR, JA, and IJA. And they found that of the, I think, 800 or so articles that they had looked at, which studied mediation effects, that not one of them used this kind of intensive longitudinal mediation, which is what they propose here. So really interesting article in terms of how we can harness the power of AI-generated data to better understand mediation effects, better understand causality out there in the field. Obviously, if we can get access to this fantastic and rich data. So as well as offering a process, they give an example of a process with advertising data, and the specific example that they use within the article is around personalized advertising. And they look at the proposition that personalized advertising might initially lead to more negative reactions, going back to this point about too much personalization and intrusiveness that one of the papers in the special issue went over, but then said that over time, once they become more used to this increased personalization, that this can be that they can overcome their initial objections and actually respond more favorably to it. So they look at personalized advertising and how that impacts emotions, in their example defined as people's physiological reactions, and how that leads to increased expenditure on the brand. So really, really interesting article there. If you ever manage to get hold of some data like this, then provides a really nice, easy step-by-step process which you can use to analyze such data, to look at the mediation effects and to look at causality in the field. So some great examples there about how to analyze such data. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up the article in the special issue. Thanks for sticking with us. I'm just going to briefly summarize the key takeaways then, and then we'll just summarize some of the perhaps key future research directions. And then if anyone's got any questions, then feel free to post them in the chat, or we can look at them at the end. So key takeaways from the special issue are that, 1, it reinforces that AI can be a double-edged sword for advertisers, and in doing so provides more evidence around the different nuances that exist around the benefits and risks of using AI in advertising. Some particular points to note, as Eddie went over with his consumer-based studies, that AI salience receives a mixed reaction from consumers. Sometimes better behavioral reactions in terms of number of likes and shares actually translate into increased skepticism and lower levels of inauthenticity. So some sort of competing effects there in terms of the kinds of dependent variables which we might want to measure. And particularly that's the case for luxury brands who want more authentic connections, for whose customers want more authentic connections with brands. And then looking at personalization, and that sometimes too much personalization can end up being intrusive and have negative influences. So that's the first key takeaway. The second key takeaway is about AI's role in advertising processes. And I think the key theme there, or the key message, is that it's primarily a complement to human experience and creativity rather than the driving force. Although the point that is made in the first article is that it depends upon the kind of process that's being used. For routinized process, then AI can be more of the driving force, but with that human oversight. Whereas for more creative processes, then it helps to augment creativity, but obviously can't be used to replace humans in that part of the process. So those were the key messages there around AI and its integration into advertising organizations. And then finally, that last article that I mentioned about how we can harness the power of new AI-generated data to analyze the different causal connections and the different dynamics of mediational effects in field settings. So very hard sometimes to kind of piece together the different articles in a special issue, but those might be three of the key sorts of takeaways from these really interesting articles that were in the special issue. Okay, then that kind of leads us into some key areas for future research based on the emerging gaps. So these kind of stem from the kinds of questions that were asked at the end of the articles in the special issue, plus our understanding. Obviously, just a snapshot of some of the questions that could be asked here, because in many ways it's such a new field that some of these questions, they're almost an endless amount of questions that could be of interest to researchers. But from the industry perspective, we've grouped them into three key themes. The first is around strategic integration of AI into creative workflows. So how do agencies manage the balance between human creativity and AI usage? Where can AI help and where does it hinder? And what are the implications for different roles and the skills required in those roles during the process? Obviously, ethics and legal frameworks was very front and center in the different articles within the special issue. So that remains a very fruitful area of future research. How are advertisers therefore ensuring transparency in AI-generated content? What regulatory frameworks are needed to ensure fair use of AI-generated content? And those types of questions there. And then whilst this last question didn't come up as part of the special issue and the articles in it, we felt it was a question that was worthy of future examination. So trying to understand the degree to which AI and different usage of AI provides links to return on investment, trying to link those marketing activities to those downstream areas of organizational performance. So a few key questions there around the industry perspective. From the consumer behavior perspective, some key concepts came up around authenticity and trust. So those kinds of concepts seem to be front and center in terms of our understanding of how consumers react to AI-generated advertising. So a couple of questions there. And what other product categories might AI-generated content harm or boost trust and authenticity? That was one of the key themes within a couple of the papers that were in there, that AI can be viewed negatively, but also positively, and sometimes it depends upon the product category and the context in which it's used. So looking more at those different contexts and nuances there around where AI is more or less suitable. Should trust in AI-generated content be conceptualized in the same way as traditional conceptualizations of trust, or are there different facets there which we might need to explore? And then the other area which was again front and center in the majority of the consumer behavior-related articles was around consumers' knowledge and awareness of AI. So do different consumer segments of AI literacy and receptiveness exist? If so, what are their characteristics? How does AI literacy affect persuasion, trust, and willingness to engage with AI-generated advertising content? And then, of course, there's the culture element. Again, that wasn't within any of the articles within the special issue, but seems very, very important to examine in future work. Again, just a snapshot of the articles in the special issue. Just to conclude, Hope that the webinar was useful to you. Hope it's given you a good overview of the papers in the special issue and tried to sort of group them for you. Obviously, it was just an overview and a skeleton of those papers and some of the key points that came from them. So do look out for the special issue, which is going to be published in June, and which is, I think some of the articles are pre-published online. Hope we did those papers justice, which we presented, but obviously did our best to present the key elements of those. Thanks to you all for making the time, and Colin for initiating the special issue. And as Colin mentioned at the start, big thanks to all the authors and all the reviewers who put in significant amounts of time to make the special issue a success. So thanks to everyone, and of course yourselves, for coming along. So I'll now just pass you over to Colin to finish up. And obviously, if anyone's got any questions, we're very happy to answer those.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you have questions, feel free to throw those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. But yeah, thank you again, Ben and Eddie, for such an amazing overview of the special issue and all the really neat papers and articles that came out in it. I really especially like the listing you've got of different future research ideas and questions. I think it's really interesting just thinking about, the different types of, products and services where this might make more sense, or if it doesn't, like we saw with the luxury paper, what might mitigate that, and maybe unpacking some of these existing constructs like trust or like, creativity, and thinking about them in a new way when it comes to, Gen AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, obviously very fruitful area of research and plenty to do there for people to follow up on.
Yeah, and it was fantastic that you had such a wide spectrum of different topics that came through as well. Just
Yeah.
everything from personalization to looking at luxury to looking at how it's, creativity is used by agencies and marketers. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yep, we got lucky with the combination of papers that came in. So
We actually got this question: how many papers do we receive for the special issue?
What was the question? Do you remember offhand, or
How many papers do we receive for the special issue?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think there were about 30, 35, something like that.
Yeah, it was very well received. We had a lot of submissions, which was great. So, but obviously a lot of work for you folks to go through as well on the reviewers. But yeah, definitely a good reaction to the special issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next question: why did those papers not make it to the special issue?
Oh, okay. I think I'm looking at a different box to you, Eddie. So you've got some questions coming in somewhere else, have you?
Yeah, it might be
It's
Sorry.
Q&A.
Okay. Sorry. Can you repeat the question then, Eddie?
Why did those papers not make it to the special issue? So why do they fail?
Well, that's a good question. And I think there's probably several reasons. Obviously, with a special issue, one of the key things is going to be around fit with the special issue. Papers have to exhibit a strong fit. Some fitted more strongly than others. But then it often boils down to, the usual kinds of issues in the review process about a paper being able to illustrate its contribution and using the right kinds of methodologies that are suited to answering the research questions that they ask. So wide range of reasons, but Colin may wish to expand on that, I think, here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's just typical stuff that we see with JER, for instance. So I mean,
Yeah,
JER gets around 500 submissions a year, and we probably publish around 40 articles, right? So it is definitely a selective process. Part of it's fit with the journal, part of it's the quality of the methods, and part of it's going to be like how much contribution does there get into? Does a paper provide? So basically, how new and how insightful is it relative to what's already been known? A final one for JR, which is important, is it interesting and useful for practitioners as well too? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. There are a couple more questions that popped up, Colin.
Yep, for
These
sure.
are probably more for you. So if I just share this, so the first one was, thanks for sharing the papers. I would like to cite the article. I was wondering if you could confirm whether the June 2025 publication date refers to the official print publication or the online first publication.
Yep. So that's the print issue, and I think most of the papers are already available preprint. So if you take a look at our Journal of Advertising Research site, you can take a look and see latest articles, and that'll have all of the articles that have been accepted but are not yet in a print issue. And so you can
Yeah.
take a look, and you'll see many of the ones that we went through today are available there as well too. Um, yeah.
And thanks, Colin. And so yes, you can cite those articles now because most of them are up, but if not, they'll all be out in the June issue. And the second question then was, after this special issue, will you still welcome other papers on AI? I'm happy just to start that one off, Colin, but maybe you want to add to it as the editor in chief. But special issues are often started or initiated because there's a lot of interest in a particular topic. So this is very topical kind of issue. So I'm sure that future papers will be the kinds of future papers on AI are exactly the kind of thing that journals like JAR are looking for. But Colin may wish to expand on that.
Yeah, definitely. You're 100% right, Ben. So the whole focus with the special issue is really to kind of push people to focus on this area and to really kind of gestate, new research on this topic, which is exactly what we saw happen with the special issue that Ben, Des, and Eddie did, which is fantastic. And so the hope is just, to really, hopefully we'll see more research in this area because it's such an important and topical, thing to take a look at. Yeah, so definitely, if you've got research on AI and it's interesting and has good contributions, please definitely send it into JR. We're excited to see more research in this area. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Ben and Eddie, for doing such a really nice overview of the special issue, as well as all your work on that. Thank you to everybody who came today as well. And if you want to take a look at this again, it'll be available later on our YouTube page as well. And you'll be getting a link to that in your email, I think in an hour or 2 hours or something, to our YouTube page. But this will probably be up in a couple hours. But thank you again for doing this, and hope you have a great rest of your day.